Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session. Oh, wait a second. We're not live yet.
Sure.
Sorry.
Little by
Okay, we're live. Welcome, everyone, to our session. Our guest is Minhaz, who is CEO and co-founder of Battery Low Interactive and Sleepy Penguin Studios. In the last 9 years, his team built more than 40 games, and he's going to tell us about how to get behind designing mechanics that set the game apart without copying the inspirations. Let's start.
Hello, Adrian. Thank you for introducing me. Hello, everyone. I hope you all are safe and sound and happy, obviously. So it's good to be here, first of all. It would have been much more fun if I could attend it in person, definitely. But, well, like something is better than nothing, definitely. So I'll take that any day. So let me just quickly share my screen over here. Just give me a second. I'm gonna just share the screen so that you can see the tech. It says processing. Well, Adrian or anybody else, like you can share with me if you can see the screen. Uh,
No, I can't see it yet. Please try again.
okay, sure. It still says processing.
What's your system, Windows or Mac?
Can you see this one? It's
Oh,
Windows.
yeah, I can see it now. Yeah, it's here.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, here we go. So yeah, the name of the session is Behind the Killer Game Mechanics Design. And before we move into all these bows and arrows or shooting uh, not so volatile animals. Let me introduce myself. So, thanks, Adrian, for doing it, by the way. So, apart from running a couple of companies related to games, which is one is Bachelor Interactive and Sleepy Penguin Studios that you can see in here. So, in Bachelor Interactive, we work with serious games and AR, VR stuffs mostly. And Sleepy Penguin Studios is basically our indie game dev studio. So, where we work on our own IP. And so apart from that, I also have another identity that I run So my game, you can find them out in 2021 from Actress, which is a Spring Furniture publishing house. And if you before you start wondering why there's a flash icon over here, so in our company we have this culture where we have our superhero nicknames according to our characters. And my teammates thought that the flash suits me most. So yeah. So okay. So before we move into the tiny little details or the page where we discuss about game design, let's quickly move into what the topic is about. Is a killer game mechanic. Like if you ask ChatGPT or if you ask Google about it or Bard AI, whatever. So they might not be dumb enough to give you the list of mechanics you should have like implement in a killing game or where you actually kill it. But they will definitely talk about something else. And if I ask you as well, so probably you can name many of your favorite games that has some sort of mechanic that stood out in your mind for quite a while. And among these, like we can name a few. For example, if you guys are diehard fans of the Lord of the Rings franchise, like I was, and I am, I will be till I die. So, so I was pretty much hyped about the games Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War, of course. And like even if they didn't have any killer mechanic or a certain mechanic that really make it stand out, so everybody talked about, even if even the fans, the players who were not diehard fans of the like lore and the world, Middle Earth, they also became fan of the game for many mechanic, obviously, but one of those mechanics stood out definitely, and that was very unique. That was a nemesis system in Shadow of Mordor and both Shadow of War. So where different enemy units like could actually you could meet them multiple times in your journey, and they could remember the last encounter you had with them, and they could evolve in a way. For example, if you could if you could like cut off somebody's hand in one battle, and if they were to come back sometime later on in the game and encounter you once again, say they would have like one hand cut off, but probably they have armed themselves with some more weapons or something like that, so that they can like be your, give you a much harder time this time. So we probably have heard of some of us maybe heard of the game called Portal, which literally is about creating portals. So that was a unique mechanic, and that was a killer mechanic, of course, because the game featured and the game sort of moved around this mechanic. So you could remember this game, of course, for the name and also for the mechanic, because whenever you enter a certain scene, you have to sort of create an entry and an exit portal, and that's how you move around. And we also know about the bullet time mechanics in Max Payne. Uh, Wait, before I move forward, I think the GIFs are not visible, so I'm gonna have to reshare this thing. Let me just quickly reshare. Sorry about the inconveniences. Yep, it should be much better. Okay. So, Adrian, please let me know if you cannot see the screen. But if you're good, I'm just gonna continue. So, yeah, so we were talking about the bullet time mechanics in Max Payne. Well, pretty much who have played the game, we all know about like how it induced the interesting mechanic of bullet time in the combat. So in Max Payne, like you are outnumbered by enemies like any other games in the genre. So the way it tackles that design challenge is by slowing the time out, and then you could basically target more enemies at once and then execute a killer combo by killing them all. And well, we also have to talk about God of War, I guess, because like the Leviathan axe, like for most of us, it's the favorite weapon. Some of us may like the Blitz of Towers, of course, but like the way it comes back is like it's very memorable. Like you press Y and the blade comes back from wherever it is and killing or hitting more enemies on the way. It's just way super cool. And even after playing the game like I think 5 years ago, so I still remember it, and I'm sure like all of us who have played this game, they remember it. So yeah, so we have talked about some killer mechanic randomly in some famous games or indie games, and some AAA games, of course. But to break it down, like really break it down into bits. So, what were the common characteristics in those design elements, if I ask you? So, the first thing that would come to anybody's mind is basically it's fun. So, like, if I ask you, like, if those mechanics were fun, was the Leviathan Axe like, was it fun, like getting it back by pressing a button, feeling empowerment? Was the bullet time mechanic fun in Max Payne? Did it feel good to kill these enemies by slowing time and shooting? So all these examples, if you combine, so what are the common things? First of all, like there's a pattern that the players understand that you can do this thing and it feels good to do it, or it feels some sort of emotional punch if you do it. And you kind of like to feel that. So which matches your personal interest, it is aligned with your interest, and it does at a like certain pace that feels good to you, right? And also it's not all in vain. Like you get some reward out of it. So it's so if we were to break down the element of fun, probably we can talk about these characteristics, like talking about learning a pattern. Like as human beings, we love to learn things. Like since we are babies, we grow up learning different things, like to walk, to sit, to swim, and to learn alphabets, to learn to play, those things. And human beings like to work according to their personal interest. So yeah, and also the learning, it has to be in a good pace so that it doesn't feel very rushed or it doesn't feel very slow. And at the end of the day, doing all those things, it has to give you some sense of reward in it. So these things, if we combine, makes up fun. And these mechanics are definitely fun. What else? Like we all understand that killer mechanic by the definition, killer mechanic should be fun, right? But what else? So yeah, rewarding definitely. There's also another fact that is here, that is the player agency. So you're doing something in your game, right? You're pressing a button, you're moving a joystick, and it has to mean something, right? It has to give you feedback. Yeah. So if you do something, you're getting a feedback. That's called agency. So there's a player agency in all those mechanics that we talked about, and you can give more examples if you have certain preferences about your killer game mechanics that you have seen in certain games. But if I ask you, like, is it necessary? Is it absolutely necessary to get community acceptance? Well, I don't think there's a clear answer to this. I mean, because like in terms of community acceptance, it's always going to be a great thing because not everybody will like a certain feature, but but it can actually make a difference in the first place. And sometimes people even don't understand why they like certain game, why they like certain mechanic in a game. So in the subconscious mind, they just see that it feels good, it feels so good to play this game. But like probably it's not widely accepted in the community. Probably the community loves the game as well, but they're not sure why they love it so much. The perfect example of this thing is the game that probably is one of the all-time bests, that is called the Red Dead Redemption 2. If you have played it, if you have watched it, if you have heard about it, you know that it's so good, it's so well crafted, and it's one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time, of course. Is it a unique game? Well, like you can argue. I mean, there are certain things you can say, okay, these things are probably new. I haven't played those, I haven't seen those things in before, but well, like if you are a hardcore gamer, well, probably you have encountered almost all the mechanics that we can see in the Red Dead Redemption 2, right? But it still feels so good and it still feels so different than all other games that you have played. Now, why is that? And does it mean that like it doesn't have a killer mechanic, or does it mean that it's just another, just another game? No, I'm saying that it's probably one of the best. And well, most of us would agree with me. I know it for a fact. We know it for a fact, but it doesn't feature so many things as unique. But what it does well is it ticks these boxes. You see, it's very rewarding to play this game. You get the feel of living in the Wild West, you get the feel of being an outlaw, you get a player agency when you see that you commit certain crimes, certain level of crimes, then you are hunted down, then you're wanted. If you are a good fella, if you live there doing only good deeds, then you see a certain animal in the end of the game, in the epilogue. But if you do not, if you like living a bloody life out there and like rampaging through the community and all, these things mean that your actions as a gamer in the game, they mean something. It ticks the box of player agency. So, and in terms of community, like in the community, many people like many things about Red Dead Redemption 2. Some people just like the horse riding. Some people just like to just roam around. People just want to do the bounties. So it varies, but these things are common. It's rewarding, it's fun, and it has its agency, and it has a variety of community acceptance. Maybe so. Since we have talked about quite a few examples by now, let's them a bit in terms of rate. So, how do these mechanics get made? So, many of you should be familiar with the term potions, right? You can probably heard them in Harry Potter universe, or probably played it in Witcher or some other game. You've heard of that. So it's like solutions, right? So how do we make potions or solutions? So when you're designing a game mechanic, there are typical like few steps. So I've tried to break it down in terms of how we work in our studio, or how typically like studios work that I have seen in my experience of past 9 years of working in this industry. So first, every single game mechanics, whether it's unique or not, so there's a core objective behind it. So you want to implement certain things. You want to fly in the game, or you want to like smash something. So why do you want to do that? There's a certain objective behind that, that I want to smash something because the character will be angry, and I have to like sort of show off this anger, or the player has to sort of let go of that anger, and that's why like I have to smash things. So setting a core objective. Why do you want certain mechanics? Why do you want that smashing thing? And also, we have to envision the player experience. Like, what will the experience feel like when you do this as a player? And the overall picture of the game, like you being a protagonist or a character in the game. If you do this certain mechanic, if you perform this certain mechanic, so does it resonate with the ultimate goal of the game that you're building? So are you making like very peaceful walking simulator? So if your character, if your protagonist is somebody who works there, not paying attention to any bad things that happens around, just focusing on the good things. It's a very feel good game. Your character is a very very peaceful guy himself, calm guy. So probably smashing things is not a mechanic that resonates very well with the whole narrative of the game, does it? But if I say that petting animals or probably sunbathing or like catching fish, so these mechanics, they sort of like resonate with a guy who is calm and peaceful and who doesn't want to like get into trouble. So if you incorporate those things, so those can feel like something they can resonate to. But at the same time, you have to ask those mechanic like fishing or petting animals. So are they like do they comply with the player agency? Is there something interesting about it? And is it aligned with the overarching goal of what we are making? So if it ticks all those boxes, or most of the boxes sometimes, then you might just have a killer mechanic. And it doesn't necessarily have to be unique per se. We have discussed about it, right? And it doesn't have to be a very like super unique idea that you're doing for the first time. Why is that? We're going to delve into that quite a bit. Now, you see, once upon a time, like long, long ago, when like the game mechanics were first being introduced, when we were playing the first games, the human beings were playing the first games or video games in their lives or arcade games. So the mechanic used to be two-dimensional. So when I say two-dimensional, what are the two dimensions? One is basically the goal regarding experience, and the second is basically the inspiration. Like it could come from somewhere else. It could come from another game. It could come from a real life incident. It could come from something else. But that was the case. Example, Pac-Man. So you probably heard of the story behind the inspiration of Pac-Man, right? So like the creator of Pac-Man basically got inspired by the ants, the movement of the ants, and from that he envisioned the game of like Pac-Man. And if we talk about some more modern examples like Limit or Quantum Leap, so these things, for example, so they incorporate like action. They want to give the player a feeling of like of action, doing action, and also at the same time they incorporate the concept of time travel, right? So you see, like if you go back to the formula, so the goal regarding experience and the inspiration, right? So the goal regarding experience was making an action game, but they wanted to blend something with it, and there comes the part of real life or other inspirations. So they introduced the concept of time travel in those games, and then they became famous for that. That okay, these games are very good examples of like having time travel experience in a video game. and people played those games, and they were defined. Probably many people thought that as defined them as killer mechanic. We can talk about also indie game here, Stardew Valley, like the farming in a very in a very interesting storyline, I would say. And people still explores this game, and like it was a game that sort of revolutionized that particular genre of farming games. So back then, this was the case, and still in today's world, this can be the case when you blend a goal regarding experience with another inspiration borrowed from something else, and you can get a killer mechanic or a mechanic maybe. But as things moved on, like as we kept getting bigger, the industry just kept increasing in size, and so many games got born. Like every year right now, we see that it's very good to be this industry because we see over the whole world, we see so many people coming into this industry, making so many games, so many indie game studios and also AAA game studios coming in, mid-sized game studios getting born or promoted or expanded. So all of them coming in, and there seems to be a crisis of novel ideas, right? So how I term this is like original quotients. So you see, you could have some basic quotients, right? And you can have some advanced quotients. So the key to making an advanced quotient is, of course, making that particular potion and then mixing something else, some secret herb or spice, something else with it. And that's how it became three-dimensional. And it can only get like bigger. So if it feels very complex, I'm going to really break it down. So just in a bit, just bear with me. See, so over the years, since we have had like thousands or millions of games, maybe, so in the history of human beings and the history of game industry, so people at times feel like, okay, many things, most of the things have been discovered. Many people are good at, and it's really difficult to get novel ideas, which is true. But does that mean the others who cannot produce a novel idea will not work in their games? Of course not. You can still work on your game and you can still make a killer mechanic in your game. How? Let's go to some examples. Right? There's this game called The Pathless, where this character, like the character has this bow and arrow, like it's a part of, and this eagle that you see in this video, that they were part of the whole identity of the character. And when they were exploring this world, they wanted to make it a fun exploration. So what they did was they took the inspiration from like exploring games like Journey or any other exploration games that you can mention. So from that, they took the inspiration of movement, but at the same time, they wanted to introduce something else. So they introduced shooting as a mechanic and timing it. So as you see, the character moves through this plane and shoots through these targets. So if you can hit it like properly and proper timing, then you get a power boost in terms of like speed boost. So this mechanic was like liked by the players very well, and it was well accepted, and it's remembered for this. And you see, this particular mechanic really blends into the character as well because it uses the tools the character already has, and it uses them. It doesn't feel alienating and it doesn't feel out of place. That's why it made sense. And so it sort of uses this. And also, like, we can talk about another example, which is like more popular, like God of War. We talked about this Leviathan X example, right? So, see, many games have used boomerang in their life, right? With auto callback. For example, Zelda also had it, right? But God of War made a very small twist. What was the twist? You have to press a button to call your ex back. So this particular addition was the spice into the already established method of boomerang weapons, right? So we have seen and we have used boomerang weapons like in many other games, but this particular twist of calling it back was new, and that was the spice for it. And these are the examples where like I saw it, like we can say that these are like three-dimensional examples of creating a game mechanic where, again, coming back to the slide, where we define the goal regarding experience, then we combine it with some sort of inspiration from any other games or any other movies or any other like real life examples maybe. And if it's not enough, then we add or we subtract some of the inspiration or some of the spice or herbs, like whichever way you call it. So that's how probably you can like make it three-dimensional, but it will not remain only three-dimensional in the future, I'm afraid. The dimension only will increase, might increase in the future because like we may also run out of like unique like these herbs as well. Sometime we might feel like, okay, enough is enough. Nothing new probably can be like creating something new in terms of spices or herbs would be even more challenging than just, let's try something else. Let's increase the dimensions. So probably we might see like examples of like a new dimension getting incorporated in the future. We don't know. Now, so we have been talking about addition for quite a while. Let's talk about some subtraction as well, shall we? So as I mentioned in the formula, like it says the goal regarding experience, adding it with some inspiration, and either add or subtract some other spice or inspiration. So like if you see like the example of battle royale games, right? So the battle royale games, so like you can compare them with like traditional third person shooter games like you know uh for sometimes first person shooter games, and also the concept of the movie slash book slash universe of Hunger Games. So the concept is the same. So you put like 5 to 10 people in a circle and the circle gets smaller every single time, and then you have to survive, you have to be the last one to survive. That's the concept of Hunger Games, right? So the genre battle royale, it got born by combining these two genres, sort of. So that's the example of like two dimensional making of a game mechanic. And what Fortnite did, like they took it one step ahead. They added another dimension. They added building, like it's another spice or herb or inspiration, as you can say. So they made it, they added it, and then we got Fortnite, which is like, which was the next version of it. And if we talk about spices a little bit more, we can talk about uh, the Batmobile, probably in Arkham Knight. So calling your ride in a game is pretty much common in many games, right? You can call your ride in Witcher, you can call your ride in Red Dead Redemption, and probably many other, even in uh, well, many games that you can have in mind. But what Arkham Knight like does differently is that if you are on in the air when the Batmobile arrives, it plays a really cool animation that lands you inside the Batmobile. So it basically like feeds into your power fantasy. And as Batman, like you need to feel that. So it really resonates with the character, right? So it's Batman, right? You can talk about the calling method, like the wind calling feature in the Ghost of Tsushima. So we always see those little markers on our mini maps in like many games, mostly in open world games like GTA and others. But like what Ghost of Tsushima introduced was a gust of wind or animals that you can follow apart from the markers. It really gave the people the freedom that, "Well, okay, I don't need to nuke into my minimap just to go to this place. Yes, I need a marker, I need some guidance, but the winds can guide me. And me being a ghost, it really makes sense. It makes all the sense in the world to follow the wind or the nature, right? So these are the examples, little examples of spices that you can have in your mechanic combined with some other mechanic. We can talk about smaller games like My Friend Pedro. Like in this game, it's basically a shoot 'em up game, right? And then it combines the mechanics of like slowing time, like the game in Super Hot VR or like any other time slowing mechanic that you can remember. And it like worked really well. This game was ahead. So these things, these were the some of the examples that I talked about. I would love to see like some of your examples that comes to your mind in the question answer session. Maybe we can talk about it. Uh, but there, as I was saying a few minutes ago, there are some time when you can do it differently. When in lieu of adding elements, you can also subtract elements, like the genre endless runner. So the genre endless runner, what is this? So it's basically a subtracted version of like platformers, right? So if we remove the movement challenges on one particular axis, then we have this then we have this entire genre of endless runner games. So now that we are in the bottom half of the talk, we should really talk about some hows that like we work on, or probably some other people, some other studios work on, that how do we find killer mechanics. The first part was talking about these killer mechanics and how they fit into the whole plan of game design and game making. But there comes a question of like how we can actually approach to find this, to discover this. There are actually two ways you can go about it. One is basically top down. So let's talk about it first, because most people they go for the top down. It's the most widely practiced, of course. So the top down approach. So there are basically 4 steps or 5 steps. First one is definitely defining the genre or experience goals. What is your game? What do you want the player to feel? What do you want the player to achieve? What do you want your player to feel? So experience. So that is one. And then let's say you want them to experience the thrill of racing. Then of course you list the relevant games that exist or near or under them, like anything that near goes near racing, right? And also you list out the mechanics they have, right? These are all common steps. And then comes the difficult part. Then you have to sort what works and what doesn't. And it has 2 parts. One is you have to look into these games, their mechanics, and you have to see which works for those games and which mechanic did not work. They cannot be like, probably there was not every mechanic that everybody liked. So why didn't they like them? Think about those things. You have to talk about those things. That is important. Why do people like certain things? Define those things. And then you match them with your experience goals of your game, what you want to build. And you cross match those things. Then you have your superset of possible tiny little mechanics or sub mechanics. Then you can play with. So defining goals, if we go into a little bit deeper. So, for example, how do you define goals? So games like Elden Ring, The Last of Us, they want to feel you insecure. They want you to feel helpless in a world that is very scary or that is very unforgiving. That's why like you have to fight for your ammo. You do not have unlimited ammo in The Last of Us. So you have to regularly find them. In Elden Ring, like you cannot jump everywhere. You cannot jump from the hills. Like it's not that forgiving. Like if you jump from certain heights, you die and you lose progress. You have to collect your runes once again because this game is intense. These games, they want you to feel, have that intense feeling. We can talk about some other games like the survival game, This War of Mine, or even the classic Oregon Trail. So in these games, very randomly a situation can arise. Like probably somebody stole all your food, or hell, even worse, like in Oregon Tail, like this other day, like I was playing and somebody in the middle of the night stole all my oxen, like 8 of them. And I was like laying there like with nothing to do. But you see, these games, they have these experience goals that makes you fight for survival. That's why these mechanics they resonate with them. In the contrary, games like Journey or Life is Strange, they're very feel good games, and you don't see those mechanics in those games. So, like, that's sort of how you think about defining goals and cross matching it probably with uh, the list of mechanic that you have. And like, if we talk about like something else, like what are the things that you have to keep in mind when you're approaching the top-down approach? So first of all, you have to ask the context regarding hook. What are the hooks inside this game? And why are they important? For example, so if you remember the weapon state feature in Witcher, so all your weapons, so there's or and your armors as well, so they are sort of susceptible to damage, right? They can get damaged if you use them. Every time you use them, they get some sort of like decay, right? So what do why do you think this feature was introduced in this game? Like, for example, you are making certain game and you want to have that feature from Witcher. You think it's cool. Okay, it's cool, but do you want your player in your game to explore more? Do you want to focus on crafting, creation of weapons and armors, And also, do you want your players to be on the edge always before battle, like checking your, inventory and all, if you are equipped for battle? If you want them in your game, then this particular mechanic is a good fit for you because that those were the goals, design goals behind this weapon state in Witcher 3. But like if your game is not like that, then it does not match because when you ask the why, then you get the answer because it contradicts with your it probably can contradict with your design goal of making a feel good battle system or feel good exploration game because you don't want those intense feeling in those experiences. But yeah, if you want this, then yes, it might be a very good, nice little addition that will give players nostalgia as well. So yeah, so you have to ask the why. There's the first thing. And the second thing that is a very widely spoken topic is that, like, how much should you get inspired from? Like, do you completely copy it, make a ripoff, or do you just copy certain very little elements? The way I like to name it is your game can smell of certain game, but it should not stench of that game. So I'll give you a good example. It's not a stenching example. It's not an example of stench. So we can talk about the deck building roguelike game design games like say the Spire, which was one of the genre defining games. Later on, like a refined one came by another studio, which was called Monster Train, right? So both of these games have overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam. You can see the screenshots here from Steam. But if you see the number of reviews, you see that it's almost 10 times difference. First game, like almost one of the first games, STS, Slay the Spire, it got like over 10 times review than the Monster Train one. So what does it tell you? It tells us that like making something out of inspiration, although if you make it really good, if you make it really refined, even if you do that, you'll always be second, most likely. So this is a good example. So if your game is stinking of something, some other good game, like if it smells too much of it, then probably it will be a stench. So be careful about that. So one thing that we see in the game pitches or like when the designers are talking about the game, do you remember this game? We're just making this game, but better. So this is the trap I'm talking about. And another question that comes is basically, is it just another Mario game? So the question comes, if it's just another Mario game, then why should I play it? Why should I play your game and not Mario? Is it better than Mario? Well, maybe I've had enough of Mario in my life. Then I don't want to play your game. So be careful about like putting those words in your pitches and in your design thinkings, because it might be a trap. And even if you do really well, you might end up like this. That is probably one of the best case scenarios. And many questions can come in. Like many of you have played Among Us, but how many games like Among Us got famous? Like Among Us did. How many Flappy Birds do you remember? So if you really think about those things, then these come into our mind. You see, like the game Flower, so it had many mechanics like level up systems, spells, resource, and time management, but they eventually got rid of them all because it went against the relaxing goal of the game. And if you are doing bottom up, like matching up all the mechanics out there and then trying to figure out an idea, trying to define a genre, Then also be careful about it because mashup of mechanic, well, if not fit properly, if they don't fit properly in your overarching goal, then it might turn out to be a very bad mashup. One. And second, when you have a genre, then think about the genre fatigue as well. So are your players like suffering from genre fatigue? That it might not be a very good idea to put a game out there like this. So don't forget your originality, like why you are making this game, and what do you want the players to experience it. And after you match up those mechanics, are you sure you like it now? Are you sure you like your Frankenstein? Ask yourself that questions. And these are a few like hacks, as you can see, from for bottom up. Like if you want to explore certain mechanics to match it all up, so you can attempt different game jams on a regular basis. You can go to Reddit in the subreddit like r slash game ideas where people put in their ideas that they will never make any games in with those. And also, most importantly, play both good and bad games because you should be able to define and know what are the things that some people have done bad, you know, so that you can do better with it. So yeah, with that, like I wish you all happy game making, of course, and you can connect with me in this like channels. I'm in LinkedIn, Discord, uh, right now X, not Twitter, and also you can shoot me messages on WhatsApp or like Facebook, mail, whatever you like, really. But I like to get in touch with people from all over the world to talk about games and share the experience of making games all together. It's really fun for me and a place passion for me. But just finishing up saying that, like, well, we should always have inspirations. We should always have games that we look up to. But when we are making games, getting inspired by them, we need to check ourselves once in a while that it's not getting giving ourselves any genre fatigue. It's not giving ourselves any stench, but it can smell, of course. And as long as you keep those things in mind, I think you should be good. So yeah, with that, like I think we're done with my part of the slides, I guess. Uh Adrian, you're here.
Yes, I am here. So now it's time for questions. I want to remind our audience that you can ask questions in the chat, and Minhaz is going to read and answer them. So we're going to wait a couple of minutes because we have a 30-second delay and see if there are any questions.
Sure, sure, absolutely. Thanks.
All right, it looks like there are no more questions in the chat. So I have a question from myself. What do you think are some good inspirations for killer mechanics, and how do you look for them? Uh, like, for example, if you want to design a game, where do you start looking to find that unique gameplay mechanic?
Good question. Thank you, Edwin. So first of all, we need to remember that like every game maker, like every game designer or the people who are like the brains behind a certain game. So all of us have our own preferences. Like I have played certain games in my life. I do play certain games. You have played certain games. Some of those games might match, some of them will not. And so each of us have our own story, own version of likings regarding game mechanic. So I am a fan of certain mechanic, you are a fan of certain mechanic. Some of those mechanics will overlap. So oftentimes it depends on the team really, like what sort of mechanic do they love to play. And whatever mechanic they love to play, they will think that, okay, it's our kind of solemn duty to let other people play around the same mechanic. So they are going to resort to those mechanic eventually. That's true. But at the same time, as a studio, when you take a decision, whether you are whether you are like a 1% studio or a 10%, 20, 100 people studio. So you have to define like what sort of game you're making and why you're making. So if you are making a certain game that is very like stressing, like that makes people stressed, like getting over it by Bennett 40, right? Or like the games that I've mentioned, like Elden Ring and those some killer dungeon crawlers which are very difficult to master. So if you're making something like that, so then you have to incorporate those mechanics that resonate with it. You have to think about the mechanics that make people feel stressed in different video games. And then you make a list, and then you see which mechanic matches with your overarching goal. So that's basically the top-down approach, as I have showed in the presentation. But there's also a bottom-up approach where you list out all those mechanics out there that you guys like, your team likes, and you team thinks they can pull them off. And then you try to make a mashup and then come out with a genre that, okay, if we mix these three mechanics, we get this certain genre of game. We get a platformer. If we mix this three mechanics, or if we mix this, we get like exploration walking simulator game. So it's really variable, you see. And like if you execute them well, then with any formula you can like come up with a killer mechanic as long as your mechanic resonates with it and you have ticked all those boxes of being it rewarding, working with player agency, making it fun. So yeah, those things. And I see another question in the stream here. So so it's from Stroinsky, I think. Hi, great talk. I have one question. When do you play a game as a designer? Are you also able to take fun from it? Or do you need to separate for playing fun or playing to understand the mechanics? Good question. So one thing is, so I think it really depends. If you ask me, so I get fun from my playing endeavors, like whichever game I play. So I do take my fun out of it. That's for me. But I have seen some game designers slash game makers. They don't. We don't see the same thing like eye to eye. I mean, they don't think it's fun when you like sort of play it for work. But it really depends on the person, I'd say. So for me, it's always like playing games is fun, no matter whichever genre is. Yes, I can like certain games better than I like the other games. That can happen. But one thing that doesn't change is like the fun element of it. So I don't think we have to necessarily like separate these two. So you can sort of have both at the same time. And that's one of the reasons I think many people around the world come to this game industry in the first place. Whether they stay for it or not, that's an entirely different discussion. But people tend to come to the game industry because like you get to play your games as work as well. And that's a very big argument. And that's a very interesting thing to say no to, I think, if that answers your question.
There is one more question in the chat from Alexander. What if certain mechanics that can fit the game might be used in the game for just a small amount of time? Is it worth to implement these mechanics in the game?
Could you please repeat the question once again? Sorry.
So, is it worth to implement mechanics that are going to be used for just a short period of time in the actual game?
Okay, so in a game there can be like, of course, like multiple mechanics. Usually there is, of course, and some mechanics that you let players to interact for a long time. some mechanics are there for only short time. So in terms of experience design, so if you're playing a game, if your game is designed in a way that typical players will play it for like 10 hours, maybe. So if you have a certain mechanic that is really good, and if you let them play it for only 10 minutes in the game, then well, it might be a problem because they're not getting the most out of it. If it's the killer mechanic, if it's the only killer mechanic that you have. If you have one star mechanic, I think you should let players like experience it, or at least keep the option open for them to experience it, come back to it. You can keep them at optional as well. But if you have a star like in your team, the basic idea is to let people use it. You should use it as much as you can. So, so in answer to your question, I think if you have a star mechanic, you should absolutely let players experience that as much as possible. But yeah, at the same time, don't overkill it when I say that, because like if your game is from a particular genre and if it has a particular fan base or target group of people that you're trying to address, they will be expecting a list of things from your game: A, B, C, D, E, F, right? And if you only focus on A or B, or and just ignore the others or keep them in a very small proportion, then they will not get the entire feeling of that particular genre. Then you might end up losing that particular fan base of that genre because they have come to play, let's say, a third-person shooter game or a horror experience game, horror adventure game, and they are not getting all the elements they are expecting from it. So they might feel a bit irritated. So be careful not to use it too much, but in general, I'd say let's try to like use it as much as we can. But if we use it in a very short period of time, then it might be very tricky because then it has to be a really memorable mechanic, and it has to have a like really good placement, really good positioning in the game. But it's really difficult to put it like fine tune this in this fashion. So the safer option would be to make it in a like keep it in a substantial amount so that players can have enough time to explore it and they can come back to it. And yeah,
All right. Thank you very much for your lecture and your answers. It's time to end. So it was nice meeting you and see you next time.
thank you, Adrian. Thank you for organizing. You have good luck with the rest of it.
Thank you.